One thing I really love doing here on the channel is making videos that are inspired by you guys. And this entire video almost is going to be all about things that you guys have sent me over the past week. I think there's maybe one story in here that I put in myself, but literally everything else are things that you guys have sent me, things that you guys think are important and are relevant, and I'll be covering them here today. And obviously you saw the headline. The big one is the banks closing, guys, and this is a big problem for a lot of different reasons that we'll get into here. But this story was sent to me by Steve. He's always sending me all kinds of stories. Just in the last 2 weeks of July, we saw 30 bank branches close across the United States, guys. And that's just in a 2-week span. And those 30 branches that are closing is just a drop in the bucket. Because, for example, just in 2024 so far, Bank of America alone, just one bank, has already closed 100 of their branches, okay? And you have plenty of other banks that are closing branches right now too, like Chase, PNC, Axiom Bank, Capital, Citizens Bank, Dollar Bank, Wells Fargo, Lamont, Zions, a ton of banks. I've even heard of half of these banks before. And Bank of America really seems to be the big one that's closing a lot of their branches. In fact, out of these 30 banks that closed in the past couple of weeks, 11 of them were Bank of America. And Chase and PNC Bank, they closed 7 branches in places like Ohio, Virginia, Texas. Actually, Florida got hit the hardest with these bank closures. Florida lost more branches than any other state over the past couple of weeks. And California is actually the nation's leader with how many bank branches are closing. At 72 branches in California have been closed just so far in 2024. New York is in second place with 51 branches closed. Pennsylvania has seen 40 branches closed just in 2024, guys. These banks are closing at an alarming rate. And what the spokesperson for Bank of America said is these shifts in our branch network reflect that more and more of our clients are using digital banking for their everyday financial needs and coming into financial centers for more significant needs or to have conversations about their finances. So what the banks are wanting to do is they want to move away from having this expensive real estate and actual bank employees, and they want to just service people in the virtual world. Well, newsflash for a lot of these banks that there's already a bunch of online banks that have been doing that. I've told you guys before that Discover Bank is like my favorite online bank. A lot of you guys also like Chime. They're another online bank. And there's plenty of other ones out there that offer you 100% free checking and savings accounts. The savings rates are so much better than these other big banks like Chase and Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and those guys. And the most important thing is they don't steal your money every month, guys. These banks don't charge you to have an account, okay? So these banks that are closing branches, you know, the only advantage that those banks have had for the longest time is the fact that you can go into a branch and pull money out or talk to a person or do whatever, open or close an account in person. That's the only advantage these banks have over online banks. And so if they start closing all their branches, but they're still charging people all these bogus fees to have an account, how long is that business model going to continue to last? Probably not much longer, if you ask me. And I get it, guys, you know, things change, the world is moving on, you know, we are in a more digital age than ever before, and even I don't even have the need for an in-person bank most of the time. You know, I can't even remember the last time I needed to go into the bank for something. But fine, if you want to close your branches down, then stop charging people all these bogus fees. You know, if you want to be an online bank, then act like one and stop charging people money to have an account. One thing I find interesting is these banks are still able to survive in this environment with all these online banks that offer free checking and free savings and don't charge you anything to have an account. Same thing like with the big cell phone networks like Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile, you know, places that basically make you sign a contract, right? Versus all the smaller carriers that don't make you sign a contract, that run off of those networks, but people still choose to go with the big carriers. It's like, how long are people gonna stand for getting ripped off for before they realize that this is no longer a good deal for them? And I'm doing my part here on YouTube, letting you guys know, how poor of a deal this is, but at the end of the day, everyone has to make their own decisions and decide if you're going to be paying money to any of these big banks to have an account. And a lot of these banks that are closing branches, they claim that their internal surveys indicate that the public prefers online banking to in-person banking and rarely actually enters a bank to conduct business. While this might be true and they're just following the market trends, that's fine. But then start offering the market rate for an account, which is nothing, okay? Free, $0, no minimum balance, okay? The minimum balance to me is the biggest scam ever. You have a lot of money in the bank, they pay you money to have money in the bank in the form of interest. You don't have a lot of money, tough. We're taking your money. We're going to charge you to have money in the bank. But you got to understand something too. Like, this is bad news for the public in terms of banking accessibility and maybe a future push to CBDC, things like that. But this is a great thing for the banks because now they're saving money on rent, maintenance, supplies, salaries for all their employees. The average physical branch costs banks about $2.6 million per location annually. So that is a lot of money. So if these banks can pocket an extra $2.5 million per branch that they close, that's tremendous. Check it out. There's a deer. There's a couple of them. Wow. So neat. One thing I keep hearing a lot in the comments is, oh, look at how much the corporate profits have been soaring. There's no trouble in the stock market, there's no trouble in the economy, anything like that. Well, you have to understand, these corporate profits are a direct result of a couple of things. Number one, the sheer amount of layoffs we've been seeing in 2024 has been tremendous. And every time these big corporations lay people off, their share prices go up. So that increases their corporate profits, number one. And then you just hear stories like this with the banks. If you see bank stocks going up and their profits going up, it is because they are firing people as well. They are closing entire locations. It's just equivalent to businesses going out of business, except it's good for business for them when they can essentially bring in the same amount of money but have less expenses. So the reason why things look good is because they're able to do this, guys. They are closing down locations and people are losing jobs over this, and people are also losing services to banking even though they're paying full price for it. So this is actually a bad thing for the economy. Here we have a house listed for sale for $2.8 million, and we've been talking about all these expenses and how expensive it is to own a house. And take a look at this. They bought this house back in July of 2022 for $2.7 million. Now they're asking $2.8 million. So only $100,000 more than what they purchased the house for. But here's the thing, they're losing money because once they sell this house and they pay all the closing costs and realtor commissions and all the fees involved, they're going to come out behind on this house. So either they're the world's worst home flipper, or they are also people who can no longer afford the expenses of these houses. And check this out. Just the property taxes alone are $35,000 a year, and if you're able to get this house for slightly less than the owner paid for it, then hey, maybe it'll even go down a few $100s a year for the new owner. Now, some people are trying to get everybody jazzed up about the real estate industry right now because, mortgage rates have been coming down, so oh my God, rush in to buy a house. Well, only some people are doing that, and it's basically the very rich and the very poor. That's right, because subprime borrowers saw a 15% year-over-year increase. At the same time, we're seeing a superprime segment, which are people who have the highest incomes and credit scores, growing by 12.1% year-over-year in terms of mortgage applications. So why is this happening? Well, obviously people that make a lot of money and have high credit scores are almost immune to the current housing market. And since rates have dropped slightly, they're doing so well with everything else, with maybe properties they already own or their stock market portfolio. It's not really a surprise to see that those people are buying. But what is a surprise is to see the uptick in subprime borrowers that are trying to buy. And I think what this is a direct result of some of the stimulus programs we've been seeing happen over the past couple of years. Like, for example, last year Rocket Mortgage announced that they had a 1% down mortgage program, okay? And then Zillow followed up by doing the same thing, and United Wholesale Mortgage followed up by doing the same thing. Well, now that that wasn't good enough, this year they dropped it to 0%. You don't have to put any money down. So I think what you're seeing is people that actually qualify for these loans are actually applying for them and in some cases getting them, which is kind of unfortunate because this is the last tier of the economy to kind of get slapped in the face with these high housing costs. They're the last ones to the table that are going to be buying now that they literally have to put 0% down. And the only people that can qualify for these loans are usually people that make less than 80% of the median income in the area. So these are literally the poorest of the people in the area that qualify for these loans, applying for them, and in some cases getting them. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is those people are going to get into the houses, and maybe a year later, it's going to cost so much more than they anticipated that they're going to be forced to sell, or even worse, maybe even fall into a short sale or foreclosure situation. It's really unfortunate, but that's where this is headed, guys. Because the reality is you would not see an uptick in people in that income and credit category buying homes right now if all of these subsidy programs weren't available. If they couldn't get in at a 0% down or even a regular FHA 3.5% down, those people wouldn't be buying homes. It's that simple. And I think when I say stuff like this, people misunderstand me. It's not that I don't want people that are poor to own homes. I just know that they're not in the position to be able to do so. You don't want people that don't have any money getting into homes because they're not going to be able to afford to keep those homes. That's the real issue. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to be like, well, you know, if you don't give them a chance to get into those houses and give them a leg up, then they're never going to have a chance to get in. And that may actually be true. And that's why they do these things, to give those people a chance. Some people will sink, some will swim, and be able to keep the house. I've even heard different stories from you guys who watch my channel, you know, write me and say, well, if it wasn't for one of these programs in the past, then I never would have been able to become a homeowner. And that's all fair, and that's all great. But we're already starting to see the delinquencies go up, guys, and things aren't even bad yet. So if these people are only just now entering the market because of these programs, they're probably going to be on that list of delinquencies in the next couple of years, which ends up hurting them more than it ends up helping them in the long run. So that's my beef with it. Because the other problem is people are borrowing more and more money. In fact, the average loan amount continued to rise over the past couple of years, including this year, and now it's coming in at $339,232 is the average amount of money that people borrow to buy a house, guys. That's up 4% from 12 months earlier of $326,214. And over the last 3 years, mortgage origination balances have increased by 14% from $297,000 already up to $340,000. So people are borrowing more money than ever at higher interest rates than we have seen in a couple of decades, and somehow that's supposed to work out in the end. It's not, guys. Anybody who saw my video yesterday talking about how much the increases of just maintaining and owning a home have gone up, when you combine all these things together, it is unaffordable for most people to buy right now. It just is. To buy and hold, it's just not going to work unless you have a very substantial income. And we know people are getting in trouble already with their homes too, because they're leaning on things like HELOCs to borrow against the house just to pay for life and probably to pay for the house too. In fact, the HELOC balances have increased for 2 years straight, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And that's a new report from this week, guys. 2 years in a row, we're seeing the balances on HELOCs, which stands for home equity lines of credit, going up. So people are borrowing more and more against their homes as life becomes more unaffordable. Does anybody see that as a coincidence? Because I don't. But they say, oh, this is nothing to worry about because the HELOC originations are still at comparable levels to where they were pre-pandemic. Well, I think it is something to worry about because pre-pandemic, we didn't have all this inflation. It didn't cost nearly as much money to maintain a house and just keep a roof over your head. So if you had the same amount of people borrowing more money than ever out of these homes that they were pre-pandemic, they're actually in worse financial shape than they were before. People are borrowing more and more money to maintain these houses at a time when the cost to maintain them is also higher than ever. So I don't know how that's not something to worry about. And this is all coming at a time when we're seeing a massive amount of layoffs, guys. We just covered this with the banks. Well, Scott sent me another story about how Cisco is going to be doing another round of layoffs this year. And so far, just in 2024, you've had 393 tech companies lay off 126,000 people, according to layoffs.fyi, guys. And that's just in the tech sector alone. And some of the big ones were just recently, with Intel laying off over 15,000 people, Dell laying off over 12,500 people, Tesla's doing another round of layoffs. Everybody is letting people go right now. So Cisco's joining the club, and they're going to be cutting jobs due to a higher focus on growth areas, including cybersecurity and AI. So once again, you have people losing jobs to robots here. That's what this is. They didn't actually announce how many people they're going to let go, but a lot of people are speculating that's going to be close to 4,000 people, because that's how many they laid off in February. So it could be more, it could be less. That's still a lot of people who are on the hook for potentially losing a job soon. So that's the other thing, guys. Do you want to be jumping into buying a house right now, especially as a subprime borrower, when you could be looking at losing your job? You know, these are people that make a lot of money who are losing jobs too. And just because you don't make a lot of money, or you work at a place that you feel like your job is secure, doesn't mean that can't come to an end too, because it can. You know, yesterday's video I covered all the expenses of owning a home and how much all that stuff is going up. And one thing we didn't talk about in that video is how much the cost of utilities are going to go up and have been going up. You know, here in California, people have seen their electric bills climb, you know, a couple 100% over the past 4 or 5 years, which is tremendous. This is not just a California problem. This is happening on the East Coast as well. In fact, Mike sent me this story talking about PJM Interconnection. They are the largest electrical grid operator in the United States. Okay, and they're basically responsible for hooking up different power supplies to the electrical grid. So the more ways we have of generating electricity, the more electricity that's generated, the cheaper and more available electricity becomes, right? Well, they've been doing a very bad job at this for a very long time. And I guess in the electricity business, they do power auctions to kind of guesstimate how much electricity is going to have to cost in the future, and they do this a few years in advance. And the most recent auction produced a price of $269.92 per milliwatt day. I don't know exactly if I'm saying that right, but get this, guys, the previous auction was at only $28.92 per milliwatt hour day for the 2024-2025 auction. So these auction prices have literally jumped 800% in 1 year. 800%. Think about that for a minute. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that your electric bill is going to jump by 800%, but you can guarantee that a lot of those costs will be passed along to you, the power bill subscriber, even if half of that expense get passed along to you, okay? Say your electric bill goes up by 400%, can you afford that increase? And the reason why this has happened is the supply and demand for electricity in the area PJM serves is completely out of whack. This is just showing you that there is far more demand for electricity in this area than there are ways to produce it. Coincidentally, this is all coming at a time when there's this giant push to have everything go electric, right? They want your car to be electric. They want your stove to be electric. They want your pool heater to be electric. They want everything to go electric, but no one has the capacity to meet these electrical needs. They just want you to pay a 400 or 800% increase in your electric bill starting next year, because this is going to start affecting customers in this area by June of 2025, guys. So a little bit less than a year you have to prepare for this increase. And anybody who thinks that we get our electricity from like all these great green renewable resources and all of that needs a reality check, okay? Because according to PJM themselves, here is the breakdown of where all the power comes from. 48% gas, okay? That's the thing that they're trying to eliminate, right? They don't want anybody driving a gas car anymore, using a gas stove, but literally half of the electricity is produced by gas. 21% comes from nuclear, 18% comes from coal, and only 1% of it comes from solar, 1% comes from wind, 4% comes from hydro, and 5% comes from demand response, and 2% from other resources. So the amount of renewable sources on here relative to the amount of electricity they produce is a joke, guys. It's nowhere near enough to power a grid system let alone fulfill this fantasy where we're going to be living in this all-electric world in 10 years from now. It's just not going to happen. So they say that electricity prices are skyrocketing because the grid operator PGM is failing to plan for the kind of energy infrastructure we need to affordably keep the lights on. And this PGM, they serve like a good handful of northeastern states, guys. So like I said, this is not just a California or Florida problem. People in the Northeast are going to start seeing their electric bills skyrocket in about a year from now because of this. So I don't know, when I hear about things like this happening and I see how much the cost of home ownership is rising and the cost of just keeping the lights on now is rising, I would be very skeptical and cautious if I were you out there borrowing to buy a house right now, especially at record debt levels with the amount of people that are falling behind on their bills. That should tell you something. But hey, you guys can do whatever you want. I'm not here to tell you that you should not buy a house. If you feel that you found the right deal, you feel that your finances are well enough in order and healthy enough to make it happen, then by all means, don't let me stop you. I just want to make sure that everyone in that position knows the potential hurdles they could be facing if they decide to become a homeowner today. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I will see you in the next one.